10-year-old boy crashes his father's car while trying to drive and is stopped by the police. When the officer sees what the boy had inside the car, he panics. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 9:47 p.m. as David Wheeler stared into his third cup of coffee, watching the steam rise in lazy spirals. The kitchen counter was cluttered with the remnants of a hasty dinner. 2 empty microwave mac and cheese containers, a half-eaten apple, and Emma's untouched carrots. He should clean up before leaving, but the text message from the hospital still glowed on his phone. Critical staff shortage. Can you come in early, Dad? Marcus's voice came from the doorway. David turned to find his 10-year-old son standing there in his oversized Burlington Devils baseball t-shirt, clutching a math worksheet. You said you'd check my homework before, right, buddy? I'm sorry, but there's an emergency at the hospital. David ran a hand through his graying brown hair, noting how Marcus's shoulders slumped slightly. Leave it on the counter. I'll look at it tomorrow morning when I get back. Okay? Marcus nodded, but didn't move from the doorway. In the harsh fluorescent kitchen light, he looked older than his 10 years. His mother's dark eyes serious beneath Sarah's characteristic furrowed brow. The same expression she'd worn when concentrating on her crossword puzzles on Sunday mornings, before the cancer. Is Mrs. Peterson coming over? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Their neighbor had been away visiting her daughter in Boston for the past week. No, but Aunt Janet. David stopped himself, remembering. No, she's in Seattle for that conference. He checked his watch again. 9:49 p.m. Listen, you're old enough to handle this. Emma's already asleep, right? Yeah, I read her 2 stories. She wanted 3, but I told her you had to work. David felt the familiar twist of guilt in his stomach. He crossed the kitchen and knelt in front of his son, noting how Marcus's socks didn't match, one blue, one white with a hole in the toe. When was the last time he'd done laundry properly? You know the drill, right? Doors locked, don't answer for anyone. The hospital number is on the fridge and 911 for real emergencies, Marcus finished. I know, Dad. I'm not a baby. No, you're not. David squeezed his son's shoulder, feeling the slight tremor there despite Marcus's brave face. You're my responsible young man, just like Mom always said. Remember? The mention of Sarah hung in the air between them, heavy and bittersweet. Marcus's eyes darted to the photo on the refrigerator, Sarah at the beach 2 summers ago, her smile bright despite the headscarf covering her hair loss. David quickly looked away. There's leftover lasagna in the fridge if you get hungry. Don't stay up too late playing those video games. I mean it this time. He tried to sound stern, but Marcus's slight smile told him he wasn't succeeding. It's a school night, Dad. I know. David grabbed his scrubs jacket from the back of the kitchen chair, checking his pockets. ID badge, pen, stethoscope. The familiar routine of preparation helped push down the nagging doubt about leaving the kids alone again. A soft creak from upstairs made them both look up. Emma? David called. She does that sometimes, Marcus explained. Walks in her sleep a little. I always check on her. David's chest tightened. When had his 10-year-old become so adept at parenting his little sister? Sarah would have known how to handle this better. She'd always known what to say, how to balance work and family without everything feeling like it was constantly on the verge of collapse. I'll be back by 8 tomorrow morning. Earlier if I can manage it. David headed for the door, then paused. You can sleep in my bed if you want. Just, if you get lonely. Marcus straightened his shoulders. I'm okay in my room, but maybe I'll check on Emma one more time. The sound of the TV from the living room provided a low background hum, Marcus's preferred white noise since Sarah's passing. Another detail David had somehow missed learning about his own son until recently. As he grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door, David caught his reflection in the hallway mirror. The dark circles under his eyes had become a permanent feature, matching the perpetual stubble. He could never quite find time to shave properly. Sarah would have teased him about looking like one of his patients. Dad? Marcus called just as David opened the front door. Be careful, okay? The words echoed Sarah's usual farewell, and for a moment, David couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. Always am, buddy. Love you. Love you too. The door clicked shut behind him, and David forced himself not to look back at the window where he knew Marcus would be watching. The autumn air bit through his scrubs as he hurried to his car, the motion sensor light casting long shadows across the driveway. In his rush, he didn't notice his phone slipping from his pocket onto the passenger seat, or that it had slid down into the crack between the seat and center console. As he backed out of the driveway, David caught a glimpse of Marcus's silhouette in the living room window, a small sentinel in the night. The boy lifted his hand in a wave, and David waved back, pushing down the constant worry that gnawed at his conscience. They'd be fine. They were always fine. But as he turned onto Maple Street, heading toward the hospital, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about tonight. Maybe it was the unusual stillness in the air, or the way the autumn leaves skittered across the road like warning signs. Or maybe it was just the weight of too many nights like this, accumulating like the unpaid bills in his desk drawer and the unanswered messages from Emma's teacher about her adjustment issues. The radio crackled with late-night jazz as Burlington General Hospital's lights appeared in the distance, a beacon drawing him toward another 12-hour shift of other people's emergencies. Behind him, his house grew smaller in the rearview mirror, holding his children and their unspoken fears in its darkened rooms. Marcus stood at the living room window until his father's taillights disappeared around the corner, counting slowly to 60 like he always did. It was a habit he'd developed in the months after Mom died, counting things, organizing them, creating patterns he could control when everything else felt chaotic. The house creaked and settled around him as he moved away from the window, his sock-clad feet silent on the hardwood floors. The TV murmured in the background, some late-night documentary about ocean life that he wasn't really watching. He'd learned that silence made the house feel too big, too empty, especially on nights like this. His math homework lay forgotten on the kitchen counter, the multiplication problems half-finished. Miss Jenkins would understand, she always did when he explained about Dad's night shifts. Sometimes he wondered if the teachers had some special note in their files about him and Emma. Wheeler kids. Mom died. Dad works nights, handle with care. The thought made him straighten his shoulders as he climbed the stairs to check on Emma. He didn't want to be handled with care. He wanted to be strong like Mom had told him to be before. Before the last time in the hospital. Emma's door was cracked open, a slice of hallway light falling across her pink comforter. She'd kicked off her blankets again, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant Mom had given her on her last birthday. Marcus tiptoed in and carefully pulled the covers back over his sister, watching her steady breathing. "Mommy," she mumbled in her sleep, turning slightly. Marcus froze, but Emma didn't wake. She did this sometimes, called out for Mom in her sleep. Dad didn't know Marcus had never told him. It would just make him sad, and Dad had enough sad in his eyes already. Back in his own room, Marcus tried to focus on his book, The Hobbit, which his teacher had recommended. But the words kept blurring together, and his mind wandered to the photo album hidden under his bed. He'd been looking at it earlier, particularly the pictures from that last summer at Lake Champlain. Mom had still been strong enough to swim then, her laugh carrying across the water as she taught Emma to float on her back. The house phone's shrill ring cut through his thoughts like a knife. Marcus jerked upright, his heart hammering. 2:17 a.m. glowed on his bedside clock in angry red numbers. Nobody called this late unless something was wrong. Dad always said not to answer the house phone after bedtime, but what if it was the hospital? What if something had happened to Dad? The phone rang again, more insistent this time. He padded down the hallway, glancing at Emma's room. She was still asleep, thank goodness. His hand trembled as he reached for the kitchen phone on its fourth ring. Hello? Is this the Wheeler residence? A woman's voice, unfamiliar and breathless. I'm trying to reach David Wheeler. I'm Barbara Collins, Margaret Wheeler's neighbor. Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. Grandma Margaret? My dad's at work. I'm Marcus. Oh, Marcus. Listen, honey, your grandmother's had a heart attack. The ambulance just took her to Central Vermont Medical. I tried calling your father's cell, but static crackled through the line, garbling Mrs. Collins's words. Hello? Mrs. Collins? Marcus pressed the phone harder against his ear. Which hospital? Is she more static than critical condition? They're saying it's serious. Need to reach your father. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the silent phone, his pulse roaring in his ears. Grandma Margaret was sick, maybe dying, and Dad needed to know. But Dad's phone had gone straight to voicemail when he tried calling, and he didn't know the direct number for the ER where Dad worked. He tried dialing Mrs. Collins back, but got only a busy signal. His hands were shaking so badly now that he almost dropped the phone, putting it back in its cradle. Think, he told himself. What would Dad do? What would Mom have done? That's what you're supposed to call in emergencies. But as his finger hovered over the numbers, doubt crept in. This wasn't his emergency, was it? It was Grandma's, and she already had an ambulance. They'd probably just tell him to call his dad. Besides, he didn't even know which hospital Mrs. Collins had said. Central something? Vermont Medical Center? There were so many hospitals in the area. His eyes fell on Dad's car keys, still sitting in the ceramic bowl by the door where Dad always kept his spare set. 30 miles. That's how far Grandma's house was. He'd heard Dad say it enough times. If he could just get to her house, Mrs. Collins could tell him which hospital, and then maybe he could find Dad. The thought was crazy, impossible, dangerous. Mom would have said it was absolutely out of the question. But Mom wasn't here anymore. A floorboard creaked upstairs, and Marcus's heart nearly stopped. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing her eyes. Marcus? Who was on the phone? He opened his mouth to tell her to go back to bed, but the words stuck in his throat. She looked so small in her butterfly pajamas, her dark hair a tangled mess. He couldn't leave her alone, could he? But he couldn't just do nothing while Grandma Margaret might be dying. The car keys gleamed in the bowl, catching the light like a sign. Or a warning. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 3? Was it Daddy? Emma asked, taking another step down the stairs, her small hand gripping the banister. Her stuffed elephant, Mr. Trunks, dangled from her other arm, its once pristine gray fur now worn from countless nights of comfort. Marcus's mind raced. He could lie, tell her it was nothing, send her back to bed. That's what a responsible big brother would do. But Emma had developed a sixth sense about lies since Mom died. They all had, really. As if losing her had made them hyper-aware of anything that felt false or uncertain. It was about Grandma, he said finally, watching his sister's face carefully. She's sick. Emma's lower lip trembled. Like Mommy was sick? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. No, not like that. It's her heart. They took her to the hospital, but I don't know which one, and Dad's not answering his phone. And he stopped, realizing he was scaring her. It's going to be okay. I'll figure something out. Emma descended the rest of the stairs, her bare feet silent on the wooden steps. She looked at the car keys Marcus had been staring at, then back at her brother. Even at 6, she could read the conflict on his face. You want to go find her, she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus swallowed hard. I have to, Dad would want to know, and what if... He couldn't finish the sentence. What if Grandma died alone, like Mom almost had, if Dad hadn't made it to the hospital in time that last night? I'm coming with you. No. Marcus shook his head emphatically. Absolutely not. You need to stay here and what? Be alone? Emma's voice rose slightly, edged with panic. Like when Mommy left and never came back? The words hung in the air between them, heavy with shared grief. Marcus remembered that day. Dad had left Emma with Mrs. Peterson while he and Marcus went to the hospital. Emma had never forgiven them for leaving her behind, even though they'd thought they were protecting her. This is different, Marcus tried to explain, but Emma was already shaking her head. You can't leave me alone. Her small fingers gripped Mr. Trunks tighter. I won't let you. I'll scream. I'll wake up the whole neighborhood. Marcus knew it wasn't an idle threat. Emma, please. It's dangerous. I don't even know if I can drive properly. Then it's dangerous for you too. Emma's chin jutted out stubbornly, Mom's determination written across her young features. Remember what Mommy said? We stick together. Always. A car passed outside, its headlights sweeping across the living room walls. making both children freeze momentarily. In that brief illumination, Marcus saw the fear behind his sister's brave facade. The same fear that had lived in her eyes since the day Mom didn't come home from the hospital. He looked at the clock. 2:27 a.m. Dad would be in the middle of his shift, focused on other people's emergencies. The phone sat silent, offering no solutions. Outside, the streets would be nearly empty at this hour. If they were going to do this, okay, he said finally, the word feeling like a key turning in a lock. No going back now. But you have to do exactly what I say. And you have to help me. I can't do this alone. Emma's face softened. She crossed the room and took his hand, her small fingers intertwining with his larger ones. I'll help. I'm good at helping. Get your shoes and coat, Marcus instructed, trying to sound more confident than he felt. And grab that blanket from the couch. It might be cold. As Emma hurried to comply, Marcus quickly wrote a note, his handwriting messier than usual with nervous energy. Dad, Grandma Margaret had a heart attack. Mrs. Collins called, but the phone cut out. Going to her house to find out which hospital. Had to take Emma. I'm sorry. Love, Marcus. He propped the note against the coffee maker where Dad would be sure to see it when he got home. Then he grabbed his own jacket and shoes, checking that both were properly fastened 3 times. Another counting ritual that helped calm his nerves. Emma returned, wearing her purple winter coat over her pajamas, the living room blanket draped over her shoulders like a cape. She'd even remembered to put on socks under her light-up sneakers. Sometimes her capability surprised him, though it probably shouldn't. She was a Wheeler, after all. Ready? He asked, picking up the car keys. They felt impossibly heavy in his hand. Emma nodded solemnly. Ready. But Marcus. Yeah. Can you reach the pedals? The question, so practical and innocent, startled a nervous laugh from him. I think so. I've watched Dad drive a million times. It can't be that hard, right? But as they stepped out into the cool night air, the car looming before them like some sleeping giant, Marcus felt the full weight of what they were about to do. He was 10 years old, about to drive a car in the middle of the night with his little sister on board. Mom would be horrified. Dad would be furious. But Grandma Margaret was alone somewhere, her heart failing, and no one was answering their phones. We stick together, Emma whispered, squeezing his hand. Always, Marcus squeezed back, then pressed the key fob. The car's lights blinked in response, like a wink of conspiracy in the darkness. The driver's seat loomed impossibly high as Marcus approached the door. He'd sat there before, pretending to drive while Dad ran quick errands. But this was different. The responsibility felt physical, like a weight pressing down on his chest. Maybe we should, he started to say, but Emma was already climbing into the back seat, arranging her blanket like it was just another car ride to school. You can do it, she said with complete confidence. You're the smartest kid in your class. Mrs. Anderson said so at parent night. Marcus swallowed hard and opened the driver's door. The interior light illuminated the complex array of buttons and dials on the dashboard, suddenly looking far more intimidating than they had during his play-acting sessions. He had to scoot the seat all the way forward before his feet could reach the pedals, and even then he had to stretch. Okay, he muttered to himself. Seat belts first. He checked his own, then twisted around to make sure Emma was properly buckled. Right foot is gas, left foot is brake. Mirror adjustments. He fiddled with the rearview mirror until he could see out the back window properly. The key slid into the ignition. Marcus took a deep breath and turned it. The engine roared to life, making both children jump. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet neighborhood. Marcus quickly turned down the radio, which had started blaring the late-night jazz station Dad always listened to. Now what? Emma whispered from the back seat. Now? Marcus's hand hovered over the gearshift. Dad always did something here, right? The brake had to be pressed down. He stretched his leg as far as he could, pressing the brake pedal to the floor. The gear shift moved smoothly from P to D. The car started rolling forward immediately, faster than Marcus expected. He yelped and slammed on the brake, sending them both jerking forward against their seatbelts. Sorry, he gasped. Too hard. Emma giggled nervously. It's okay. You're doing great. Marcus eased his foot off the brake, and the car began to crawl forward. He turned the steering wheel carefully, remembering to check both ways before pulling out of the driveway. The car moved like a massive, reluctant animal under his inexperienced control. They made it to the end of their street without incident, though Marcus's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He flicked on the hazard lights, remembering how Dad used them when driving slowly in bad conditions. Which way to Grandma's house? Emma asked. Right on Maple, then left at the big intersection, Marcus recited. He'd memorized the route from countless trips with Dad. Then we follow the highway signs. The car crept along at 15 miles per hour, Marcus too terrified to go any faster. Each approaching vehicle sent his heart racing, but at this hour, the streets were mostly empty. The few cars that did pass them probably assumed they were having car trouble, thanks to the flashing hazard lights. You're doing it. Emma's voice was filled with pride. You're really driving. Sure, Marcus replied, though her enthusiasm helped calm his nerves slightly. I need to concentrate. The dashboard clock read 2:43 a.m. The streets of Burlington were eerily quiet, streetlights casting pools of yellow light at regular intervals. Marcus counted them as they passed. 1, 2, 3. Keeping track helped him focus on something besides his trembling hands. They approached the major intersection where they needed to turn left. The traffic light turned yellow, then red. Marcus pressed the brake too hard again, and the car jerked to a stop several feet behind the white line. Red means stop, Emma announced helpfully from the back seat. Green means go. I know that, Marcus said, but he was grateful for her running commentary. It made this surreal situation feel almost normal, like one of their make-believe games. The light turned green. Marcus checked 3 times in each direction before attempting the left turn. The steering wheel felt huge in his small hands as he navigated the curve, the car swinging wider than he intended. Now we just follow this road until we see the highway signs for Montpelier, he said, more to himself than to Emma. That's where Grandma lives. They passed the closed shops of downtown Burlington, all dark and shuttered. The car's headlights caught the window displays, mannequins and shop signs appearing ghostly in the darkness. Marcus kept checking the rearview mirror, terrified of seeing police lights, but so far, they'd been lucky. Then Emma's small voice broke the tension. Marcus? I need to use the bathroom. The car swerved slightly as Marcus processed this new crisis. Can you hold it? I think so. But how much longer? Marcus did some quick math in his head. At their current speed, maybe an hour? Probably more. Oh, Emma was quiet for a moment. I should have gone before we left. We all should have done a lot of things before we left, Marcus muttered. But there was no going back now. They were committed to this crazy plan. As they approached the highway entrance ramp, Marcus felt a new wave of fear wash over him. The highway meant faster cars, more lanes, more chances for something to go wrong. But it was also the only way to reach Grandma Margaret. We stick together, he whispered, echoing their earlier promise. Always, Emma responded from the back seat, her voice small but determined. The car crawled onto the entrance ramp, hazard lights still blinking steadily, carrying its young passengers deeper into their nighttime adventure. Behind them, Burlington's lights grew dimmer, while ahead, the dark highway stretched out like a river of uncertainty. Officer Michael Sullivan sipped his lukewarm coffee, watching the occasional car pass through the intersection of Main and South Willard. The digital display in his patrol car showed 3:17 a.m., the quietest part of the night shift, when even the college students had mostly settled down. 23 years on the force, and these late hours still felt strange. Ever since Claire had left 2 years ago, he'd volunteered for night patrol. It was easier than lying awake in an empty house, thinking about his daughter Lily sleeping in a bedroom across town, seeing her only on designated weekends. The radio crackled with routine updates, a noise complaint on Pearl Street, a false alarm at the university library. Sullivan logged each one mechanically, his mind wandering to tomorrow's scheduled dinner with Lily. 13 now, and already acting like she had the world figured out better than her old man. Movement caught his attention. A car traveling unusually slowly down South Willard, hazard lights blinking. Sullivan straightened in his seat, professional instincts kicking in. The vehicle, a dark Honda Civic, was moving at what appeared to be less than 15 miles per hour. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I've got a possible 10 to 51 on South Willard, heading north. Going to check it out. Copy that, Unit 47. Sullivan pulled out behind the Honda, maintaining a distance. No obvious signs of intoxication. The car was moving slowly but staying perfectly centered in its lane. Almost too perfectly, as if the driver was being extraordinarily careful. He ran the plates quickly. Registered to a David Wheeler, Burlington address. No outstanding violations. The hazards were on, suggesting mechanical trouble, but something about the situation felt off. Sullivan flicked on his lights. Not the siren. No need to wake the neighborhood if this was just someone having car trouble. The Honda immediately began pulling over, the brake lights flashing several times as if the driver was having trouble modulating the pressure. Dispatch, traffic stop on South Willard near Maple. Plate number Victor Tango 7249. As Sullivan approached the driver's side, his flashlight beam revealed something that made him stop mid-stride. The driver's head barely cleared the steering wheel. "What in the world?" he muttered, quickening his pace. The window rolled down with a mechanical whir, and Sullivan found himself staring at a boy who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. The child's face was a mixture of terror and resignation, his hands still gripping the steering wheel at perfect 10 and 2 positions. "License and registration, please," Sullivan said automatically, then immediately felt foolish. I don't have a license," the boy replied in a small voice. "I'm Marcus Wheeler. This is my dad's car." Sullivan's flashlight beam swept the interior of the vehicle, catching movement in the back seat. A little girl in pajamas and a winter coat looked back at him, clutching a stuffed elephant. "Hi," she said, giving a small wave. "I'm Emma. I had to come because we stick together. Always." 23 years on the force had prepared Sullivan for many things, but finding 2 children out for a drive at 3 in the morning was not one of them. Protocol dictated he should call it in immediately. Possible parental neglect, endangerment, the whole works. But something in Marcus's expression made him pause. "Want to tell me what's going on here, son?" Marcus's lower lip trembled slightly, but his voice remained steady. "Our grandmother had a heart attack. Mrs. Collins called but the phone cut out, and Dad's at work but he forgot his phone at home, and we didn't know what else to do. We left a note," Emma added helpfully from the back seat. "On the coffee maker." Sullivan shone his flashlight on the center console, noting a crumpled piece of paper with what appeared to be a phone number partially written on it. Next to it lay a worn photograph of an elderly woman surrounded by Christmas decorations, her smile matching Emma's. "Your father's at work?" Sullivan kept his voice calm, professional. "He's a nurse at Burlington General," Marcus explained. "Emergency room. Night shift. We tried calling but—" The boy's voice cracked slightly, and Sullivan saw his hands tighten on the steering wheel. In that moment, he wasn't seeing a traffic violation or a potential crime scene. He was seeing himself at that age, the night his own mother had her first stroke, the helplessness of being too young to do anything but wait. "Okay," Sullivan said, making a decision that would either be the best or worst of his career. "Here's what we're going to do." Officer Sullivan motioned for Marcus to slide over to the passenger seat. The boy hesitated, his hands still frozen on the steering wheel, as if letting go might shatter what little control he had left of the situation. "It's okay, Marcus. I'm going to help you," Sullivan said softly, opening the driver's door. "But first, I need to understand exactly what's happening. When did Mrs. Collins call?" As Marcus carefully unbuckled his seatbelt and scooted over, his voice trembled. "About an hour ago. She said Grandma was taken to Central Vermont Medical. But then the phone cut out and—" "Central Vermont Medical?" Sullivan interrupted, his expression changing. He pulled out his radio, then stopped. "Hold on." He reached for his patrol car's computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. Marcus and Emma watched in tense silence, the patrol car's blue and red lights painting their faces in alternating colors. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need a status check on a patient admitted to Central Vermont Medical within the last 2 hours. Name is Margaret Wheeler, cardiac case. The radio crackled with static before a female voice responded. Stand by, Unit 47. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Emma had crawled forward between the seats, still clutching Mr. Trunks, her small face pinched with worry. Unit 47, confirming patient Margaret Wheeler was admitted at 0147 hours. Currently in emergency surgery. Listed as critical condition. Sullivan's face grew grave. He keyed his radio again. Copy that. Dispatch, I need you to contact Burlington General ER. Looking for Nurse David Wheeler. Priority message regarding family emergency. Marcus's breath caught. Is Grandma going to? Hey, look at me. Sullivan turned to face both children. Your grandmother is getting the best possible care right now. But there's something you need to understand. What you did tonight, driving this car. I know you were trying to help, but you could have been seriously hurt. Or worse. We didn't know what else to do, Marcus whispered, tears finally spilling over. Dad always says family takes care of family, and after Mom. He stopped, unable to continue. Sullivan felt something in his chest tighten. He'd seen the subtle signs. Both kids in nightclothes, no mother present. The way Marcus carried himself like someone used to bearing adult responsibilities. The radio crackled again. Unit 47, Burlington General reports David Wheeler is currently in trauma surgery. Cannot be reached immediately. Emma made a small, frightened sound. Like when Mommy was in surgery? Marcus reached back and grabbed his sister's hand. No, Em. Dad's not sick. He's the one doing the surgery. He's helping people. Sullivan watched this interaction, years of police experience warring with parental instinct. Protocol said he should take the children to the station, call social services, file a report. But looking at these kids, their fierce determination to reach their grandmother, their obvious fear of being separated, he knew there had to be a better way. Dispatch, Unit 47 requesting supervisor authorization for emergency transport of 2 minors to Central Vermont Medical, family critical care situation. Will need additional unit to secure civilian vehicle. There was a longer pause before the radio came to life again. Unit 47, Sergeant Cooper authorizing transport. Unit 23 en route to your location for vehicle security. Thank you, Marcus breathed, relief evident in his voice. Don't thank me yet, Sullivan said, though his tone was gentle. We're going to have a very serious conversation with your father about tonight. But right now, let's get you to your grandmother. Safely. As they transferred to the patrol car, Sullivan noticed Marcus glancing back at their father's Honda, guilt written across his young face. The car will be fine, Sullivan assured him. Officer Chun will make sure it gets back to your house. Right now, I need you both to buckle up and tell me everything you know about your grandmother's condition. As they pulled away from the curb, lights flashing but siren silent, Sullivan caught Emma's eye in the rearview mirror. Your elephant's name is Mr. Trunks, right? He asked, remembering her earlier introduction. Emma nodded solemnly. Well, Mr. Trunks should know he's riding in a real police car now. That's pretty special. A ghost of a smile crossed Emma's face. The first Sullivan had seen all night. Unit 47 en route to Central Vermont Medical, he reported, then added more quietly. Sometimes the right thing and the wrong thing look an awful lot alike. Don't they? Marcus, staring out the window at the passing night, whispered back, that's what Mom used to say. David Wheeler's hands moved automatically as he sutured the laceration on his patient's forehead. His movements precise despite the exhaustion weighing on his shoulders. The ER had been chaos since he'd arrived. A multi-car pileup had brought in 8 trauma cases, and they were still short-staffed. Dr. Martinez, patient's pressure is dropping. A voice called from behind the curtain. Need you on this, Wheeler, Dr. Martinez said as she rushed past. Soon as you're done there. David tied off the last stitch, quickly checking his work. Almost finished. 2 minutes. The overhead speakers crackled. Nurse Wheeler to the charge desk. Nurse Wheeler to the charge desk. Urgent. David frowned, glancing at the clock. 3:47 a.m. Nobody called nurses to the desk during trauma unless his heart stuttered. The kids. I need someone to finish here, he called out, already pulling off his gloves. A younger nurse stepped in immediately, and David was moving, pushing through the double doors toward the desk. Nancy, the charge nurse, held out a phone. Her face told him everything he needed to know before she spoke. Burlington PD on the line. It's about your children. The receiver felt like lead in his hand. This is David Wheeler. Mr. Wheeler, this is Officer Michael Sullivan. Your children are safe. I need you to hear that first. David's knees buckled slightly, and he gripped the desk. What happened? Where are they? I found them about 20 minutes ago. They were trying to drive to Central Vermont Medical. Sir, your mother was admitted there with a cardiac event. What? David's voice cracked. My mother? What do you mean they were trying to drive? The officer's voice remained steady, professional. According to your son, they received a call from your mother's neighbor about a heart attack. When they couldn't reach you, Marcus, well, he made a decision. Not a good one, but an understandable one, given the circumstances. David's mind raced, trying to process too many crises at once. His mother, the kids, the car. Sir, Sullivan continued, I'm transporting them to Central Vermont Medical myself. Your mother is in surgery right now. The children are scared, but otherwise fine. A commotion erupted behind him, monitors beeping, voices raised. David turned to see Dr. Martinez gesturing urgently. Wheeler, we need you now. David pressed his free hand against his forehead, the world spinning. I can't. I'm in the middle of multiple traumas. I can't leave. Dad? Marcus's voice suddenly came through the line, small and frightened. I'm sorry. I know it was wrong, but Grandma, the sound of his son's voice, so young, yet trying so hard to be brave, broke something inside David. He thought of Sarah, what she would say, what she would do. Dr. Martinez, he called out, his voice carrying across the ER. Family emergency. I have to go. Martinez looked ready to object, then saw his face. She nodded once, sharply. Go. We'll manage. Back into the phone, David spoke rapidly. Marcus, listen to me. Stay with Officer Sullivan. I'm leaving right now. Tell Emma. Tell her I'm coming. What about your patients? Marcus asked, and David felt tears sting his eyes at his son's constant concern for others. Some things are more important, David said, already pulling off his scrub top. I love you both. I'll be there as fast as I can. As he rushed to his locker, David's mind flashed to Sarah's last night, how he'd almost missed saying goodbye because of a trauma case. Never again, he'd promised himself then. Never again would work come before family. Time to keep that promise. The waiting room at Central Vermont Medical Center hummed with the familiar sounds of any hospital at night. The soft beep of distant monitors, the squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum, the muted conversations at the reception desk. Officer Sullivan sat between Marcus and Emma. His usual commanding presence softened as he helped Emma complete a word search puzzle he'd found in his patrol car. Try looking diagonally, he suggested, pointing to the page. Sometimes the tricky ones hide that way. Marcus sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the double doors leading to the surgical wing. Every time they swung open, he tensed, then slumped back when another stranger walked through. The clock on the wall showed 4:23 a.m. Your dad will be here soon, Sullivan said, noticing Marcus's anxiety. It's about a 40-minute drive from Burlington, and he left just before 4. As if summoned by the words, the waiting room doors burst open. David Wheeler stood there, still in his scrub pants and a hastily thrown-on t-shirt, his hair disheveled and eyes wild. Daddy! Emma launched herself from her chair, the word search forgotten. David caught her in his arms, lifting her up and holding her tight against his chest. His eyes sought out Marcus, who hadn't moved from his chair. Marcus, David's voice broke on the name. The boy stood slowly, his face a mixture of relief and fear. Dad, I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have. David crossed the space in 3 long strides, pulling Marcus into the embrace with his free arm. For a long moment, The three of them stood locked together, Emma's small sniffles the only sound. "Mr. Wheeler?" They turned to find a doctor in surgical scrubs standing nearby, her face showing the careful neutrality that medical professionals perfect over years of delivering both good and bad news. "I'm Dr. Patel. Your mother is out of surgery." David's arm tightened around Marcus. "How is she?" "The surgery was successful. We placed 2 stents to clear the blockages. She's stable, but the next 24 hours will be critical." Dr. Patel's eyes moved to the children. "She's being moved to ICU. Family can visit briefly, one at a time. Can we see her?" Emma asked in a small voice. Dr. Patel smiled gently. "Let's give her a little time to rest first. Why don't you all take a moment to catch your breath? The cafeteria is open if you need coffee or snacks." As the doctor left, Officer Sullivan stood. "I should file my report. But first, Mr. Wheeler, could we speak privately?" David nodded, setting Emma down carefully. "Kids, stay right here. I'll be back in a minute." They moved to a quiet corner of the waiting room. Sullivan's face was sympathetic but serious. "Legally, I should be filing charges. Child endangerment, operating a vehicle without a license. The list is pretty long." David's face paled. "Officer, please. They were just trying to—" "Let me finish." Sullivan held up a hand. "I'm not going to do that. But this can't happen again. Ever." He pulled out a business card. "My daughter is 13. After her mother and I separated, she tried running away to her grandmother's house. Kids do desperate things when they're scared of losing family." David took the card, his hands trembling slightly. "Thank you for finding them, for bringing them here, for understanding?" Sullivan smiled slightly. "Just make sure they have a better emergency plan next time. And Mr. Wheeler? Get a backup phone." As Sullivan left, David returned to his children. Marcus had pulled his chair closer to Emma's, their shoulders touching as they shared the word search puzzle. "We need to talk about what happened tonight," David said, taking the seat across from them. "But first, I need you both to know something." He leaned forward, making sure he had their full attention. "I am so sorry I wasn't there when you needed me." "It's not your fault, Dad," Marcus said quickly. "You were helping people. That's your job." "No," David shook his head. "My job is being your father first. Everything else comes second. I forgot that for a while, but I won't anymore." Emma looked up from her puzzle. "Is Grandma going to be okay?" "I hope so, sweetheart. The doctors here are very good at what they do." He reached out and took one of their hands in each of his. "But no matter what happens, we stick together. Always." Marcus's fingers tightened around his father's. "That's what Mom used to say." "Yes, she did," David smiled sadly. "And she was right. Just maybe next time stick together without Grand Theft Auto." The weak attempt at humor broke the tension. Emma giggled, and even Marcus managed a small smile. "Now," David continued, "who wants to help me raid the cafeteria? I hear hospital pudding cups are universal currency among kids in the know." As they stood to leave, David caught Marcus in another quick hug. "We're going to be okay," he whispered. "All of us." For the first time that night, Marcus believed it. The sky outside the hospital windows had begun to lighten, the first pale hints of dawn seeping through the darkness. David sat between his children in the ICU waiting room, both of them finally dozing after the night's ordeal. Emma's head rested in his lap, while Marcus leaned against his shoulder, fighting sleep even now. "You can rest," David said softly. "I'll wake you if anything changes." "I'm not tired," Marcus mumbled, though his eyes kept drifting shut. Through the ICU window, David could see his mother's room. She looked small in the hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and tubes, but her color was better than he'd expected. Dr. Patel had been cautiously optimistic during his brief visit. The surgery had gone well, and Margaret Wheeler was proving to be as stubborn about recovery as she was about everything else in life. "Your kids are something else." David looked up to find Officer Sullivan approaching with 2 cups of coffee. He'd stayed well past the end of his shift, making calls and smoothing things over with the department. "Here," Sullivan offered one of the cups. "Hospital coffee. Almost as bad as police station coffee." but it does the job. Thank you, David said, carefully shifting to take the cup without disturbing the children. For everything, Sullivan settled into the chair across from them. In 23 years on the force, I've seen a lot of kids in bad situations make bad choices. But this, he gestured to Marcus and Emma, this was different. They could have been killed, David said, the reality of it still making his chest tight. Yes, Sullivan agreed. But they weren't trying to run away or cause trouble. They were trying to hold their family together. He paused, studying his coffee. Sometimes love makes us do crazy things, especially when we're too young to know better. Marcus stirred slightly. Dad? Right here, buddy. Is Grandma still okay? She's doing well. The doctors are taking good care of her. Marcus nodded, his eyes still closed. Like you take care of people? The question hit David hard. He thought about all the nights he'd left them, all the school events he'd missed, all the times he'd chosen his patience over his own children. I'm going to request a transfer to day shift, he said, the decision crystallizing as he spoke. It might mean a pay cut, but you can't. Marcus's eyes opened fully now. Your patients need you. You need me more, David replied firmly. And after tonight? Well, let's just say I got a wake-up call I couldn't ignore. Sullivan smiled. Speaking of wake-up calls, I should head home. My daughter will be waiting for our breakfast date. He stood, stretching. Mr. Wheeler, the department will be in touch about some mandatory family counseling sessions. Consider it a condition of our alternative resolution to tonight's events. David nodded. We'll be there. And Officer Sullivan? If you and your daughter ever want company for breakfast, I might take you up on that, Sullivan replied. After all, Mr. Trunks here seems like excellent company. He gently patted Emma's stuffed elephant, which had fallen to the floor. After Sullivan left, David sat in the growing morning light, holding his children close. Through the window, he could see his mother's vital signs on the monitors, steady, strong, fighting, just like her grandchildren. Dad? Marcus's voice was heavy with approaching sleep. I really am sorry about the car. David pressed a kiss to his son's head. I know, buddy, but you know what? The car doesn't matter. You and Emma, you're what matters. Always have been, always will be. As his children finally drifted into real sleep, David watched the sun begin to rise over the Green Mountains. Somewhere in the hospital, his mother was healing. Somewhere above, Sarah was watching over them all. And right here, in this moment, he had everything that truly mattered held safe in his arms. 2 weeks later, David stood in his mother's kitchen, watching through the window as Marcus helped Emma climb the old maple tree in the backyard. The autumn air was crisp, filled with the sound of leaves crunching and children's laughter, sounds that had been too rare in their lives lately. They're good kids, Margaret said from her position at the kitchen table, where she was supposedly resting but actually trying to sneak another cookie. Her color was better, and she'd regained much of her usual spirit, though the collection of pill bottles on the counter served as a reminder of how close they'd come to losing her. The best, David agreed, moving to intercept the cookie-reaching hand. And you're supposed to be watching your diet. Margaret gave him a look that reminded him instantly of being 10 years old himself. I survived a heart attack. I think I can survive a chocolate chip cookie. That's exactly the kind of logic Marcus used about driving my car, David said dryly, but he pushed the cookie plate closer to her anyway. Outside, Emma had successfully reached the first big branch, with Marcus spotting her from below. They were both wearing the bright red safety helmets that had been part of Officer Sullivan's unofficial recommendations during their first family counseling session last week. You know, Margaret said, dunking her cookie in her tea, Sarah would be proud of them. Terrified by what they did, but proud of why they did it. David's throat tightened. I know. I just wish that you could have been there. Margaret reached across the table and patted his hand. David, honey, you can't be everywhere at once. But you're making changes. That's what matters. She was right. His transfer to day shift had been approved, starting next month. They'd installed a new home phone system with backup power, programmed with every emergency number they might need. Mrs. Peterson had given them a spare key, and Aunt Janet had rearranged her business travel schedule to ensure she was in town more often. But the biggest changes weren't the practical ones. The doorbell rang, and Emma's voice carried through the open window. "They're here." David went to answer the door, finding Officer Sullivan Michael now, and his daughter Lily standing on the porch. Lily held a covered dish that smelled suspiciously like her father's famous apple crisp. "Hope we're not too early for Sunday dinner," Michael said. "Perfect timing," David replied, stepping back to let them in. "Mom was just about to pretend she wasn't going to help cook." "I heard that," Margaret called from the kitchen. These Sunday dinners had become their new tradition, born from a night of crisis but growing into something healing. Lily, at 13, had taken both Marcus and Emma under her wing, showing them her collection of books and teaching them card games that somehow always ended in fits of giggles. As they all gathered in the kitchen, Margaret directing traffic from her chair, Michael and David attempting to coordinate their cooking efforts, the kids setting the table between bouts of chasing each other, David caught himself listening for Sarah's laugh, as he often did in moments of family joy. Instead, he heard Marcus explaining to Lily about his new responsibility chart, which included a section for acceptable emergency protocols and ways to help Dad remember his phone. Emma was showing Michael her latest art project, a crayon drawing of a police car with what appeared to be an elephant driving it. "Dad," Marcus called out, "can we eat in the backyard? Like a picnic?" David looked at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Why not? It's a beautiful day." As they carried plates and dishes out to the old picnic table, David watched his children, how Marcus automatically reached to help Emma over the slight step, how she immediately saved him the biggest piece of apple crisp. They moved in sync, like partners in a dance they'd been practicing all their lives. "They stick together," Michael observed, coming to stand beside him. "Always, always," David confirmed, remembering Sarah's words, now carried forward in their children's hearts. "It just took me a while to remember that. Together includes me too." The autumn sun painted everything in warm gold, and somewhere above them, a flock of geese headed south, their calls echoing across the clear sky. Emma was teaching Mr. Trunks proper picnic etiquette while Lily and Marcus debated the merits of various superhero powers. Margaret watched it all with the contented smile of a grandmother who knew just how precious these moments were. Life wasn't perfect. There would still be challenges, still be moments of missing Sarah so deeply it hurt to breathe. But they had built something new from the pieces of their broken hearts. A family that extended beyond blood, bound together by love, understanding, and the kind of courage that sometimes looked like foolishness until you understood its source. And if, sometimes, David caught Marcus studying his car keys with a thoughtful expression, well, they were working on better ways to be heroes. Together. Always. 9-year-old boy runs away from home carrying his younger sister and enters the neighbor's house crying. When the neighbor discovers what's happening, he immediately called the police. The cabinet door creaked as Thad opened it for the third time, hoping somehow he'd missed something. His thin fingers traced the back of the empty shelf, collecting only dust. At 9 years old, he wasn't tall enough to see inside without standing on his tiptoes, balancing precariously on the chipped laminate counter that had seen better days. "Thaddy," Ren's small voice came from behind him. "I'm hungry." He turned to face his 6-year-old sister, who stood in the kitchen doorway clutching her worn stuffed penguin. The evening light filtering through the grimy window cast long shadows across her unwashed hair. She hadn't complained when he couldn't get the hot water to work this morning. "I know, Ren. I'm looking." His voice carried a patience that no 9-year-old should have mastered. The kitchen clock read 6:43 p.m., its steady ticking a reminder of another day their mother hadn't come home. 3 days now, the longest stretch yet. The apartment had grown colder as the day progressed. Thad had found the notice about the heating being cut off, crumpled behind the couch where their mother must have tossed it. He didn't understand all the words, but the big red, final notice told him enough. He climbed down from the counter and opened the refrigerator, though he knew what he'd find: a half-empty bottle of ketchup, some expired milk, and a single wrinkled apple that had seen better days. The light inside flickered weakly, and Thad wondered how long before that bill would go unpaid too. "Maybe we can share the apple?" Ren suggested, her voice small but hopeful. She was always trying to help, even when there wasn't much help to give. Thad felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the one that came whenever she tried to make things easier for him. "No, you have it," he said, reaching for the fruit and wiping it on his sleeve before handing it to her. "I had those crackers from Mrs. Peterson at lunch. Remember? It was a lie, but a necessary one." He'd given those crackers to Ren hours ago. As Ren sat at their small kitchen table, carefully eating her apple in tiny bites to make it last longer, Thad's mind wandered to their mother, Autumn. He remembered when she used to paint, her hands covered in bright colors, her laugh filling their old apartment before they had to move to this one. Before Nash. Before the needles he sometimes found in the bathroom. Before she started disappearing for days at a time with hollow promises of coming back with groceries and presents. The temperature dropped further as night fell. Thad had gathered all their blankets onto Ren's bed, creating a nest of sorts. Most of the blankets were thin, worn things, but there was one good one left, a thick, blue fleece blanket that Dr. Thorne from next door had given them last Christmas. Thad had kept it hidden from their mother, afraid it would disappear like so many other things did when she needed money. "Time for bed, Ren," he announced, watching her carefully wrap her apple core in a paper towel. She never left mess around. They'd both learned early that attracting roaches meant more problems than it was worth. "Can you tell me a story?" she asked as he helped her into her warmest pajamas, the ones with only one small hole in the knee. "The one about the penguin family?" Thad managed a smile, tucking her into the blanket nest. "Once there was a family of penguins who lived in the warmest part of Antarctica," he began, the familiar story flowing easily. He'd made it up months ago, on another cold night when the heat was out. They had special magic in their feathers that kept them warm no matter how cold it got. He continued the story until Ren's breathing grew steady and deep, but sleep eluded him. The apartment had grown so cold he could see his breath in the dim light from the street lamp outside. Ren shivered in her sleep, despite all the blankets. That's when he made his decision. Moving carefully to avoid waking her, Thad went to the closet where he'd hidden the blue blanket. It was still clean, unlike most things in their apartment. As he wrapped Ren in it, she stirred slightly but didn't wake. With gentle determination, he lifted her into his arms, surprised as always by how light she felt. The hallway outside their apartment was dim, one of the fluorescent lights flickering erratically. Dr. Thorne's apartment was only 4 doors down, but it felt like miles. Thad had seen her just yesterday, when she was coming home with her grocery bags. She'd smiled at them like she always did. Sometimes she gave them cookies, and she never asked questions when their mother wasn't around. Thad's heart pounded as he stood before her door, Ren's warm breath steady against his neck. The metal numbers, for F, stared back at him as he gathered his courage. They couldn't spend another night like this. He couldn't watch Ren shiver anymore. His knuckles rapped softly on the door, then harder when he realized how quiet the first knock had been. He heard movement inside, the soft padding of slippered feet approaching. As the lock clicked and the door began to open, Thad held his sister tighter, and for the first time in a long while, allowed himself to cry. Dr. River Thorne had seen many things in her 40 years as a child psychologist, but the sight before her doorway that winter evening would stay with her forever. Thaddeus Blackwood, a boy she'd watched grow increasingly gaunt over the past year, stood clutching his sister as if she might disappear. His tears carved clean tracks down his dirty cheeks. "They turned off the heat," he managed to say, his voice cracking. "And Ren hasn't eaten properly in days." River felt her heart constrict as she opened the door wider. The warmth from her apartment spilled into the hallway, and she noticed how Thad instinctively leaned toward it, like a plant seeking sunlight. "Come in, sweetheart," she said softly, careful not to make any sudden movements. "Let's get you both warm." Her apartment was everything their home wasn't: warm, clean, organized. Books lined the walls in floor-to-ceiling shelves, their spines creating a rainbow of colors. A kettle hummed softly on the stove, and the smell of freshly baked ginger cookies lingered in the air. She'd been about to have her evening tea when the knock came. Thad stood just inside the doorway, uncertain, still holding Wren. The little girl stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttering open. "Dr. Thorne?" Wren mumbled sleepily, recognizing their neighbor. "Your house smells pretty." "Thank you, dear," River replied, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Would you like to lie down on my couch? It's very comfortable." Thad hesitated before walking to the plush brown couch. He laid Wren down with infinite care, adjusting the blue blanket around her. River noticed how his hands shook, how he kept glancing at the door, as if expecting someone to burst in and snatch them away. "When did you last eat, Thaddeus?" River asked, already moving toward her kitchen. "Yesterday. Maybe?" He seemed uncertain. But Wren had an apple tonight. River pulled out bread, cheese, and ham from her refrigerator. As she made sandwiches, she observed Thad from the corner of her eye. He stood by the couch, one hand resting protectively on Wren's shoulder, his body tense as a bowstring. "Your mother hasn't been home?" she asked gently, though she knew the answer. The walls in their building were thin, and she'd heard Autumn Blackwood's screaming matches with Nash more times than she cared to count. 3 days, Thad whispered. "She left with Nash. Said they'd bring back groceries." His voice hardened slightly. "They never bring anything back except trouble." River placed a plate with sandwiches on her coffee table, along with a glass of milk. "Eat, Thaddeus. You need your strength." As if given permission, the boy practically fell onto the food, though he still took care not to wake his sister. River watched him eat with the desperate speed of someone who didn't know when their next meal would come. She'd seen it before in her years of practice, but it never got easier to witness. While Thad ate, River made a decision. She picked up her phone and stepped into her study, leaving the door open so she could keep an eye on the children. Officer Juniper Kovac answered on the second ring. "Junie, it's River. I need you to come to my apartment." "Yes, now. I have 2 children here." She kept her voice low as she explained the situation. When she returned to the living room, Thad had finished eating and was sitting on the floor beside the couch, his back against it, one hand still touching Wren's blanket. His eyes followed River's movements with a wariness that broke her heart. "I called someone who can help," she said, sitting in her armchair across from him. "Her name is Officer Kovac, and she specializes in helping children who are in difficult situations." Panic flashed across Thad's face. "Are they going to take us away? Separate us? Please, I can take care of Wren. I just needed help tonight because of the heat." "Breathe, Thaddeus," River interrupted gently. "No one is going to separate you and Wren. I won't let that happen. But you need more help than just tonight's warmth and food. Don't you?" The boy's lower lip trembled, and fresh tears welled in his eyes. "Mom tries sometimes," he whispered, "when Nash isn't around. But then he comes back, and they both—" He trailed off, looking at his sleeping sister. "It's not your job to be the parent, Thaddeus. You're 9 years old. You should be playing, learning, being a child. Someone has to take care of Wren." The knock at the door made them both jump. River rose slowly, maintaining eye contact with Thad. "That's Officer Kovac. She's gonna help us figure this out. Okay? You're very brave for coming to me tonight, and I promise you, things are going to get better." As River opened the door to reveal Officer Kovac's kind face, she saw Thad draw himself up straighter, squaring his thin shoulders. He looked both younger and older than his 9 years, a child forced to be an adult, finally asking for help the only way he knew how. The night stretched ahead of them, full of gentle questions and difficult answers. But for now, in River Thorne's warm apartment, 2 children were safe. And sometimes, River knew from experience, that was enough of a start. Phoenix Walsh's office at Child Protective Services was drowning in the Blackwood children's case files. She'd been working for 16 hours straight, piecing together a narrative of neglect that stretched back far longer than anyone had noticed, or perhaps chosen to notice. The morning light filtered through her dusty blinds as she spread another set of school records across her desk. Thaddeus Blackwood's attendance record told its own story. Sporadic absences, late arrivals, notes about falling asleep in class. His academic performance had plummeted over the past year. Yet his teachers noted his fierce intelligence when he was present and alert. Maintaining a B average despite everything, Phoenix muttered, running her finger down his grade sheet. God knows how he managed that. A knock on her door frame made her look up. Officer Juniper Kovacs stood there, dark circles under her eyes matching Phoenix's own. Got something, Juniper said, dropping a thick folder on the desk. Medical records. Both kids haven't had checkups in over 2 years. But the ER visits. She paused, jaw tightening. Ren was treated for malnutrition 3 months ago. The mother claimed they were having temporary financial difficulties. Phoenix opened the folder, scanning the documents. Who was the attending physician? Dr. Marcus at Portland General. He flagged it for follow-up, but Autumn never brought Ren back for the scheduled appointment. The phone on Phoenix's desk buzzed. Dr. Riverthorn's voice came through the speaker. The school counselor at Riverside Elementary just sent over her notes. You'll want to see these. 20 minutes later, they were all gathered in Phoenix's office, looking at a child's drawing that spoke volumes. The school counselor had kept it from a session with Ren 3 weeks ago. The picture showed 2 stick figures, one small, one smaller, alone in what appeared to be a dark room. No parents in sight. Classic depiction of abandonment, Dr. Thorne said softly, her psychology background evident in her analysis. The darkness around them, the way they're huddled together. Ren was trying to tell us something. Phoenix pulled up another document on her computer. I found Curtis Blackwood, she announced. Their father. He's in Seattle, remarried, has 2 kids with his new wife. Hasn't paid a cent of child support in 5 years. Bastard, Juniper muttered. There's more, Phoenix continued. Autumn's history shows a pattern. Before Nash, there were 2 other boyfriends, both with drug-related arrests. The last one, Tyler Marsh, was arrested for dealing meth out of the apartment while the kids were there. Dr. Thorne leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. How are they doing this morning? Still sleeping when I left, Juniper replied. Your spare room is probably the first proper bed they've had in months. The social worker is coming at noon to do the home inspection of their apartment. Phoenix pulled up another file on her computer. We need to locate Autumn. Last known whereabouts. Working on it, Juniper said. Nash Reeves has a cousin who owns a motel on the east side. We're checking there first. The morning wore on as they built their case. Each new document added another layer to the story. Unpaid bills, eviction notices from previous apartments, complaints from neighbors about strange people coming and going at all hours. The paper trail painted a picture of 2 children who had been failed by every adult meant to protect them. At 11, Phoenix's phone rang. It was the social worker early for the home inspection. Ms. Walsh, the social worker's voice was tense. You need to see this. The apartment. It's worse than we expected. 30 minutes later, Phoenix stood in the Blackwoods apartment, the smell of neglect hitting her like a physical force. The kitchen cabinets were empty except for a few cans of expired food. The bathroom showed signs of drug use, burned spoons, needle caps hidden behind the toilet. But it was the children's room that told the most heartbreaking story. A single mattress on the floor held carefully arranged blankets, most thin and worn. A backpack in the corner contained neatly folded clothes, a few school books, and a small stash of crackers. Next to it, a teddy bear missing an eye sat protectively in front of a child's piggy bank. Thad's emergency supplies, Juniper said softly, having followed Phoenix into the room. Look at how organized it is. He was trying so hard to create some stability. Phoenix knelt by the mattress, noting how the blankets were arranged to create a barrier against the wall, probably to keep out the cold. A child's drawing was taped to the wall, Ren's work, showing what looked like penguins huddled together. The doctor's report just came in, Juniper said, checking her phone. Both kids are underweight. Ren has a vitamin D deficiency, and Thad shows signs of stress-induced insomnia. But here's the thing, no signs of physical abuse. They were neglected but not beaten. Small mercies, I suppose. Phoenix stood, her decision made. We need to find Autumn today. These kids can't come back here. She paused, looking around the room once more. Dr. Thorne has already offered to be their emergency foster placement. She's qualified, she knows them, and they trust her. Let's make that happen. As they left the apartment, Phoenix caught sight of something that made her throat tight. A calendar on the kitchen wall, marked with a child's careful handwriting. Every few days, a small star was drawn, with notes like, "Mom smiled today," or "Mom made breakfast." Thad had been documenting his mother's good days, holding on to hope like a lifeline. Phoenix Walsh had seen many cases in her career, but something about those stars, drawn with such patient optimism, would haunt her for years to come. The day stretched ahead, full of paperwork and court filings. But one thing was clear: the Blackwood children's paper trail of neglect was about to end. The next chapter of their story was beginning, and Phoenix was determined to make it a better one. They found Autumn Blackwood and Nash Reeves at the Starlight Motel, exactly where Juniper suspected they'd be. The scene that greeted them was grimly predictable: a room thick with cigarette smoke, empty bottles scattered across stained carpet, and the sharp smell of something more sinister lingering in the air. Autumn sat on the edge of the bed, her once beautiful face hollow and aged beyond her 32 years. Her dark hair, which Wren had inherited, hung in greasy strands around her face. When Officer Kovac entered the room, Autumn barely registered her presence, her dilated pupils struggling to focus. "Where are my kids?" The words slurred together as she tried to stand, swaying slightly. "What are you doing here?" Nash lounged against the wall, his tall frame tense despite his affected casualness. At 37, he looked closer to 50, his face weathered by years of hard living. His eyes darted between the officers and the bathroom, where Phoenix Walsh suspected evidence was hastily disposed of before they opened the door. "Your children are safe," Juniper said firmly, positioning herself between Nash and Autumn, "which is more than I can say for their situation at home. No heat, no food, no supervision. Want to explain that, Autumn?" "We were coming back," Nash interjected, his voice carrying a desperate edge. "Just needed to handle some business first. Kids are fine, they know how to take care of themselves." Phoenix stepped forward, her case worker badge catching the dim light. "They're 9 and 6, Mr. Reeves. They shouldn't have to know how to take care of themselves." Autumn's face crumpled, a moment of clarity breaking through her drug-induced haze. "Thad. He takes such good care of Wren. He's such a good boy." Tears began to roll down her cheeks, cutting trails through her smeared makeup. "He's a child, Autumn," Phoenix said, softer now. "Your child. And right now he's doing your job." Nash moved suddenly, reaching for Autumn's arm. "We don't have to listen to this." "They can't. Actually, we can," Juniper interrupted, stepping between them. "Autumn, we're here to inform you that your children have been placed in emergency foster care. You'll need to appear before a family court judge to discuss their custody situation." The news seemed to hit Autumn like a physical blow. She staggered, sitting heavily on the bed. "You took my babies?" "They took themselves," Phoenix corrected. "Thad carried Wren to a neighbor's door because they were freezing and hungry. Would you like to know what we found in your apartment? Would you like to see the pictures?" Nash's facade of indifference cracked. "This is bullshit. Those kids are fine. Autumn's a good mother when what?" Juniper challenged. "When she's not with you. When she's not chasing the next high. When she actually comes home." Autumn began to rock back and forth, her thin arms wrapped around herself. "I love my children," she whispered. "I love them so much." "Love isn't enough," Phoenix said, pulling out her card. "But it can be a start. There's a bed waiting for you at Portland Recovery Center. Right now. Today. You can choose your children, Autumn. You can choose to fight for them." Nash laughed, a harsh sound. "Recovery Center? You think that's the answer?" "Autumn, baby, don't listen to them. We'll figure this out. Get the kids back." "Mr. Reeves," Juniper cut in, "you need to step back. This isn't your decision." The next few minutes dissolved into chaos. Nash, realizing he was losing control of the situation, began shouting. Autumn, overwhelmed and coming down from whatever she'd taken, started sobbing hysterically. It took 3 officers to restrain Nash, when he tried to prevent Autumn from listening to Phoenix's explanation of the recovery program. In the end, Autumn sat in the back of Phoenix's car, staring out the window as they drove away from the Starlight Motel. Nash's angry shouts faded behind them, along with the last vestiges of the life she'd been living. "They must hate me," she whispered, watching the city blur past. "My babies must hate me." Phoenix glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "They love you. That's what makes this so hard for them. Thad still marks your good days on the calendar. Did you know that? He puts little stars on the days when you smile, when you make breakfast, when you're really there." A sound escaped Autumn that was half sob, half laugh. "Stars? He always loved stars. When he was little, before Ren, before everything went wrong. We used to lie in the park and find constellations. You can find them again," Phoenix said quietly. "But first, you have to find yourself." As they pulled up to the recovery center, Autumn's hand trembled on the door handle. "What if I can't do it? What if I fail them again?" "Then you'll get up and try again," Phoenix replied. "But right now your children are safe, warm, and cared for. They're giving you a chance to heal. The question is, will you take it?" Autumn stepped out of the car, her legs unsteady but her back straightening as she looked at the building before her. Behind them, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Somewhere across the city, in Dr. Thorne's apartment, two children were having dinner at a real table, in a warm room with clean plates and full glasses. And here, in front of the recovery center, their mother took her first step toward finding her way back to them. Dr. River Thorne's apartment transformed over the next few days, childhood slowly seeping into its dignified spaces. Ren's drawings appeared on the refrigerator, held by alphabet magnets. Thad's carefully organized schoolbooks found a home on the lower shelf of River's massive bookcase. Small changes that spoke volumes about growing comfort and trust. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window as River prepared breakfast, watching Thad help Ren button her coat. It was their 4th day of their temporary placement, and the first time Thad had allowed River to make breakfast without hovering anxiously in the kitchen. "Remember to eat your lunch today?" Thad reminded his sister, checking her backpack for the 3rd time. "All of it, okay?" "I will," Ren promised, fiddling with her newly brushed hair. River had bought her hair ties with little butterflies on them, and she hadn't stopped touching them since. "She'll be fine, Thaddeus," River said gently, placing plates of scrambled eggs and toast on the table. "You don't have to worry so much anymore." Thad's hands stilled on Ren's backpack. I know, it's just..." He trailed off, his young face creasing with familiar worry lines. "It's just that you've been taking care of her for so long," River finished. "It's hard to stop." The children sat at the table, Ren immediately diving into her eggs while Thad picked at his toast. River noticed how he still watched to make sure Ren ate first, how his shoulders remained tense until his sister had cleaned her plate. "Dr. Thorne?" Ren asked, her mouth full of toast. "Can I take an extra apple for lunch? In case Thad forgets to eat his again." River's heart clenched at the role reversal, the younger sister trying to care for her caretaker. "Of course, dear. And maybe Thad can promise to eat his own lunch today." She caught the boy's eye, her gaze gentle but firm. Thad flushed, looking down at his barely touched breakfast. "I'll try." After breakfast, River walked them to school, a new routine that still felt fragile and precious. Ren skipped ahead, pointing out dogs and birds, while Thad walked closer to River, his steps measured and watchful. "Your mother's first supervised visit is scheduled for this afternoon," River said carefully, watching Thad's reaction. "After school. Phoenix will be there, and I'll be in the next room if you need me." Thad's pace slowed. Is she okay?" "She's been at the recovery center for 3 days now. Phoenix says she's doing the work, taking it seriously. Nash, he's not allowed near the center, or near you and Ren." They walked in silence for a moment, watching Ren chase a falling leaf. Finally, Thad spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I miss her so much it hurts. The real her, from before." River resisted the urge to hug him, knowing he wasn't ready for that yet. "That's perfectly normal, Thaddeus. You can miss her and be angry at her at the same time. All your feelings are valid. At the school gates, Ren hugged River impulsively before running to join her friends. The sight of her playing freely, without constant worry, made Thad's eyes water. "She's happy," he said, sounding almost surprised. "You both deserve to be happy," River replied. "Now go on, you'll be late for class." The day passed slowly for River, filled with preparation for the supervised visit. She arranged her living room carefully, removing anything breakable, setting out water and tissues. Phoenix arrived early to brief her. "Autumn's been in withdrawal," Phoenix explained quietly. "It's been rough, but she's pushing through. She knows this visit is contingent on her staying clean." The children arrived home from school at their usual time. Ren was chattering about art class, but Thad had grown quiet again, his anxiety visible in every movement as he helped his sister with her coat. When Autumn arrived, the change in her was already visible. 3 days sober had brought some clarity back to her eyes, though her hands shook slightly as she sat on River's couch. When Ren ran to her with a cry of "Mommy," Autumn's composed facade cracked. "My baby," she whispered, holding Ren close. "My precious baby." Thad stood back, his small frame rigid. River watched as Autumn looked up at her son, tears streaming down her face. "Thad," she said softly, "my brave, wonderful boy. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." What happened next would stay with River forever. Thad took one step forward, then another, his face a battlefield of emotion. When he finally let his mother hold him, his sobs were those of a child, not the miniature adult he'd been forced to become. The visit lasted an hour. They talked, cried, shared awkward moments of silence. Autumn listened as Ren showed her the butterfly hair ties, as Thad hesitantly mentioned his science project. Small steps toward healing, witnessed by the afternoon sun streaming through River's windows. After Autumn left, escorted by Phoenix back to the recovery center, River found Thad sitting in the window seat, watching the street below. "You did very well today," she said, sitting beside him. "She looks different," he observed. "Her eyes, they're clearer." "Recovery is a journey," River explained. "There will be good days and hard days. But you and Ren are safe now, no matter what happens." From the other room, they heard Ren humming as she drew another picture for the refrigerator. The sound of normalcy, of childhood restored, filled the apartment like warm light. "Can I put a star on the calendar?" Thad asked suddenly. "For today?" River smiled, her heart full. "Of course you can, Thaddeus. Of course you can." The call came at 2:47 a.m., shattering the quiet of River's apartment. Phoenix's voice was tight with urgency. "Autumn's overdosed. She's at Portland General. Nash smuggled something into the center." River glanced toward the children's room, where Thad and Ren slept peacefully for the first time in days. "How bad?" "They're working on her now. I'm heading to the hospital. The kids are safe with me," River finished. "Keep me posted." After hanging up, River sat in her darkened living room, the city lights casting long shadows through the windows. She knew that somewhere across town, in a stark hospital room, Autumn Blackwood was fighting for her life. The same Autumn who, just hours ago, had sat on this very couch, showing tentative signs of progress. The memory of the afternoon visit now seemed fragile, like a soap bubble about to burst. Autumn had brought a small gift for each child: hair clips for Ren, a notebook for Thad. She'd been shaky but present, her eyes clear and focused as she listened to Ren's stories about school. A soft sound drew River's attention. Thad stood in the hallway, his thin frame silhouetted against the darkness. "Something's wrong," he said. "Not a question." "I heard the phone." River patted the space beside her on the couch. "Come sit, Thaddeus." He moved like an old man, each step heavy with anticipation of bad news. When he sat, River noticed how his hands clutched the hem of his pajama shirt, the same nervous gesture she'd seen Autumn make hours earlier. "Your mother is in the hospital," River said gently. "Nash brought drugs into the recovery center and she took them." Thad's breath hitched, but he didn't cry. "Is she going to die?" "The doctors are helping her right now. Phoenix is there." She promised. His voice cracked. Today, she promised she was trying. She was trying, Thaddeus. Addiction it's like a monster that lies to you. It makes you break promises even when you want to keep them. They sat in silence for a moment, the distant sound of sirens floating up from the street below. Finally, Thad spoke again, his voice small. What happens if she dies? The question hung in the air like smoke. River chose her words carefully. Then you and Ren will still be safe. You'll still have a home and people who care about you. But let's not think about that yet. Your mother is fighting. She never fought before, Thad whispered. Not really. Not even when Dad left. Sometimes people have to hit rock bottom before they can start climbing up. What's rock bottom? It's when things get so bad that you finally realize you have to change. Sometimes, River paused, considering her next words. Sometimes it takes almost losing everything to understand what really matters. The night crept on. River made hot chocolate and they sat together waiting for news. Thad didn't cry, but his hand found its way into River's, holding on tight. At 4:23 a.m., Phoenix called again. She's stable. They got to her in time. Nash has been arrested. Hill faced charges for smuggling drugs into the facility. When River relayed the news, Thad's grip on her hand loosened slightly. Can we see her? Tomorrow, maybe, if the doctors say it's okay. She'll need to rest. Does Ren need to know? The question, so adult in its consideration, made River's heart ache. We'll tell her that Mommy got sick and the doctors are helping her get better. She doesn't need to know all the details. Dawn was breaking when Thad finally fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from worry. River covered him with a blanket, watching his face smooth out in sleep, young again without the weight of adult concerns. Later that morning, Ren bounced into the living room, stopping short when she saw her brother asleep on the couch. Is Thad sick? She asked, her forehead creasing with worry. He had a rough night, River explained. Let's let him sleep a little longer. As she helped Ren with breakfast, River thought about cycles, how they perpetuate and how they break. Ren worrying about Thad, who worried about her, who worried about their mother, who worried about failing them all again. But maybe, just maybe, this was rock bottom. Maybe this was where the cycle would finally break. In the hospital, Autumn Blackwood opened her eyes to find Phoenix Walsh sitting beside her bed. The withdrawal symptoms were starting again, harder this time, but something was different. The image of Thad's face, so old, so worried, so like her own, stayed with her through the shakes and nausea. This time, when the doctors offered her a place in a long-term residential treatment program, she said yes before they finished speaking. Sometimes you have to lose everything to remember what matters. Sometimes rock bottom is just the beginning. The residential treatment center sat on the outskirts of Portland, a cluster of red brick buildings surrounded by towering Douglas firs. 6 weeks had passed since Autumn's overdose, and the facility had become her world, a world of group therapy sessions, one-on-one counseling, and strictly monitored visits with her children. Today's family therapy session was different. Dr. Marissa Chun, the center's lead therapist, had asked Thad to come alone, without Ren. He sat stiffly in the oversized armchair, his feet barely touching the ground, watching his mother across the room. Thad, Dr. Chun began gently, today we're going to talk about your father. The boy's shoulders tensed immediately. Autumn's hands, folded in her lap, began to tremble, a remnant of withdrawal that surfaced under stress. Why? Thad's voice was barely audible. Because anger we don't talk about doesn't go away, Dr. Chun explained. It just goes underground and grows roots. Phoenix Walsh sat quietly in the corner, observing. She'd spent weeks trying to locate Curtis Blackwood, and what she'd found had only fueled Thad's unspoken rage. A comfortable house in Seattle, 2 well-fed children, a lifestyle that spoke of the father he could have been, should have been, to Thad and Ren. He has a new family, Thad said suddenly, his small fists clenching. A better one. Autumn made a soft sound of pain. Thad? Baby? Not better, he continued, his voice rising. Just newer, clean, not broken like us. We're not broken, Autumn whispered, though her voice wavered. We're healing. He left. The words exploded from Thad like they'd been waiting years to escape. He left when Ren was just a baby. He left us with nothing. And then you started using drugs. Autumn finished, her newfound commitment to honesty evident in her willingness to name her demons. After your father left, I started using drugs to numb the pain. And that was my choice, Thad. My terrible, selfish choice. Dr. Chun leaned forward. Thad, it's okay to be angry at both your parents. You don't have to choose whose fault it was. The boy's breath hitched. I hate him, he whispered. But sometimes I hate you too, Mom. And then I hate myself for hating you. Autumn rose from her chair, crossing the room to kneel before her son. 6 weeks of proper meals and rest had brought some color back to her face, some life back to her eyes. Listen to me, Thaddeus Michael Blackwood. You are allowed to hate what I did. You are allowed to hate that I failed you. But don't you dare hate yourself for having feelings. But Ren has always had you. Autumn's voice cracked. You kept her safe when I couldn't, when I wouldn't. But that time is over now. It's my turn to be the parent. Phoenix watched as Thad's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. His sobs, when they came, were raw and primal, the accumulated grief of years finally finding release. Autumn held him, her own tears falling into his hair, while Dr. Chun sat back, giving them space to break and begin to rebuild. Later that evening, back at River's apartment, Thad sat at the kitchen table doing homework while Ren colored beside him. River noticed how he seemed lighter somehow, as if setting down a heavy burden he'd carried for too long. Dr. Thorne, he asked suddenly, looking up from his math problems. Do you think Mom will really get better this time? River considered her answer carefully. I think she's working harder than she ever has before. And I think having a safe place to fall makes it easier to be brave. Like how we have a safe place with you? Exactly like that. Ren looked up from her coloring book. I drew Mom today, she announced, pushing her picture forward. See? She's smiling. And her eyes are the right color now, not all foggy like before. Thad studied his sisters drawing their mother standing tall, surrounded by flowers, her eyes clear and bright. Yeah, he said softly. That's how she's starting to look again. The long road to recovery stretched ahead of them all, filled with therapy sessions and supervised visits, small victories and occasional setbacks. But here in River's kitchen, watching Thad help Ren with her colors, the destination seemed less important than the journey itself. Outside, the Portland rain tapped gently against the windows, and somewhere in a treatment center surrounded by Douglas firs, Autumn Blackwood wrote in her journal about forgiveness of others, of herself, and of the long road home to her children. The Seattle rain was different from Portland's, Thad decided. Harder somehow, more insistent. He stood beside Phoenix Walsh on the wet sidewalk, staring at the 2-story house with its manicured lawn and cheerful yellow door. Curtis Blackwood's house. You don't have to do this, Phoenix reminded him gently. We can turn around right now. After weeks of deliberation and countless therapy sessions, Curtis had agreed to meet his son. Not Ren. She was too young, the therapists had decided, and honestly, she barely remembered him. But Thad needed this. I want to, he said, his voice stronger than he felt. I need to see. The door opened before they reached it. Curtis Blackwood stood there, a man Thad knew only from faded photographs and fractured memories. At 41, he looked successful, comfortable, everything he hadn't been when he'd abandoned them. Thad, Curtis said, his voice catching. You've grown so much. Thad said nothing, taking in the evidence of the life his father had built without them. Through the doorway, he could see children's artwork on the walls, family photos, a kitchen that smelled of fresh-baked cookies. All the things he'd learned to live without. A woman appeared behind Curtis, Amanda, his new wife. Her smile was kind but uncertain. Would you like to come in? I made hot chocolate. No. Thad's response was quiet but firm. I didn't come for hot chocolate. Phoenix placed a supportive hand on his shoulder as Curtis stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. The three of them stood there, the rain creating a curtain around their uncomfortable reunion. I owe you an explanation, Curtis began. No, Thad interrupted. surprising himself with his clarity. You owe me the truth. Why weren't we good enough? The question hung in the rain-heavy air. Curtis seemed to age years in seconds, his comfortable facade cracking. You are. I was young and scared, and your mother was. Don't. Thad's voice sharpened. Don't blame Mom. She broke after you left. But you just started over. Like we never existed. Through the window, Thad caught a glimpse of movement, Curtis's other children, watching curiously. A boy around Wren's age, a girl maybe 3 years younger, both well-fed, well-loved, secure in their father's presence. I see them, Thad said quietly. Your do-over kids. The ones you didn't abandon. Thad, please. My sister cries sometimes at night. She doesn't remember you, but she misses the idea of you. I used to tell her stories about how you were a secret agent or an astronaut. Anything better than the truth. Curtis tried to reach for him, but Thad stepped back, closer to Phoenix. I needed you, he continued, his voice trembling slightly. When Mom started using drugs, when I had to learn to cook for Wren, when we were cold and hungry and scared, I needed my father. But you weren't just gone, you were living this whole other life. I send money now, Curtis offered weakly. Since the court order. Money? Thad laughed, a sound too old for his young face. I didn't need money. I needed my dad. The rain intensified, but no one moved. Phoenix watched silently as Thad straightened his shoulders, looking his father directly in the eyes. I came here because I needed to see, he said. I needed to know if you were some monster who hurt us, or if you were just weak. And now I know. Curtis flinched as if struck. What do you know? That you're just a man who made choices. Bad ones. And I don't have to carry them anymore. Thad turned to Phoenix. I'm ready to go home now. As they walked away, Curtis called after them. Thad. Wait. I want to make things right. Thad paused but didn't turn around. You can't make it right, he said. But that's okay. I have people who show up for me now. Real people. And Mom. She's fighting to come back to us. She's not running away. The drive back to Portland was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Somewhere past Olympia, Thad spoke again. Dr. Thorne says sometimes we have to see our ghosts to let them go. Phoenix glanced at him. And did you let him go? I think. Thad watched the raindrops race across his window. I think I'm ready to stop waiting for him to be the dad I needed. I have other people now. That evening, back in River's apartment, Wren showed Thad her latest drawing, their strange, beautiful, chosen family. River with her books and cookies. Phoenix with her kind eyes. Officer Kovac with her protective smile. Their mother, getting stronger every day in treatment. And in the center, Thad and Wren no longer alone. Do you want to add Dad? Wren asked innocently. Thad looked at the drawing, at the family they'd found rather than the one that had failed them. No, he said, pulling his sister close. It's perfect just like this. 3 months into Autumn's recovery, the rhythm of life had shifted dramatically. The morning sunlight streamed through River's kitchen window, catching the gold in Wren's hair as she carefully arranged banana slices on her oatmeal to make a smiley face. Thad sat beside her, actually eating his breakfast without watching the door or checking the time obsessively. Mom's evaluation is today, he said quietly to River, who was preparing lunches for them both. River nodded, adding an extra cookie to each lunch bag, small rewards for brave hearts. That's right. The treatment center will decide if she's ready for outpatient care. Phoenix had explained it to them last week. If Autumn passed her evaluation, she would move into a transitional living facility, with more freedom and more frequent visits with her children. The next step toward rebuilding their family. Will she live with us again? Wren asked, looking up from her oatmeal masterpiece. Not right away, sweetheart, River explained. First, she needs to prove she can take care of herself. Then we'll talk about the next steps. The changes in Autumn were remarkable. Week by week, she'd grown stronger, more present. Her face had filled out, and her hands rarely shook anymore. In therapy, she'd begun to unravel the tangled threads of her own childhood trauma, understanding how it had led her to make the choices she'd made. But more importantly, she'd begun to repair her relationship with her children, especially Thad. Their weekly therapy sessions had evolved from tearful confrontations to honest discussions about fear, trust, and forgiveness. "I gave Mom my latest math test," Thad said, pushing his empty bowl away. "The one with the A+. She must have been very proud," River smiled. "She was. But—" He paused, considering his words carefully. She was proud in a different way now. Before, when she was using, she'd get really excited and make big promises about celebrations and presents. Now she just sees me. Really sees me. The morning routine continued, backpacks checked, teeth brushed, shoes tied. As they walked to school, River noticed how Thad no longer scanned every street corner for signs of his mother or Nash. He walked lighter now, more like the child he was meant to be. Later that afternoon, Phoenix called with news from the evaluation. She passed, Phoenix announced, her voice warm with pride. "With flying colors. The treatment team says she's one of their most committed patients. She's already lined up a job at a local bakery that works with recovery programs, and she's enrolled in community college courses for next semester." River shared the news with the children over dinner. Ren clapped with delight, while Thad's reaction was more measured, hopeful but cautious, like someone who's learned the hard way not to trust too quickly. "When can we see her?" he asked. "She'll move into the transitional facility this weekend," River explained. "After that, you can visit her there twice a week instead of just once. And if everything goes well, she might be able to take you out for short trips to the park or the library. With supervision?" Thad checked, ever practical. "At first, yes. But this is a good thing, Thaddeus. Your mother is doing the work, taking the steps she needs to take." That night, as River passed by the children's room, she heard Thad telling Ren a new version of their penguin story. Gone was the tale of baby penguins having to take care of themselves. Instead, it was a story about a penguin family getting stronger together, learning to swim through rough waters toward calmer seas. In her study, River looked over the paperwork Phoenix had dropped off, documents about long-term guardianship options, about maintaining stability while supporting family reunification. The path ahead would require careful balance, patience, and unwavering support. But watching Thad laugh at one of Ren's jokes during breakfast, seeing him actually play at recess instead of watching his sister like a hawk, noticing how he'd started keeping a journal of his own feelings instead of just tracking his mother's good days. These were the small victories that marked their progress. They were building something new here, brick by careful brick. Not a perfect family, but a real one. One that acknowledged its cracks and scars while choosing, day by day, to heal and grow stronger. As River turned off the lights that night, she heard Thad's voice from the darkness of his room. "Dr. Thorne, thank you for being our safe harbor." The words floated in the quiet apartment, a testament to how far they'd come and a promise of how far they could still go. On a bright Tuesday morning in early spring, 6 months after that desperate night when Thad carried Ren to Dr. Thorne's door, the Blackwood family gathered in River's living room for a celebration. Not a traditional one, perhaps, but significant in its own quiet way. Autumn had been clean for 180 days. She sat on River's couch, her hands steady as she held a small cake that she'd baked herself at the recovery program's bakery. Her hair was pulled back neatly, revealing clear eyes and a face that had regained its youth. A silver 6-month sobriety chip hung on a chain around her neck. "I didn't think we needed candles," she said softly, looking at her children. "We've had enough darkness." Thad sat beside her, no longer watching her every movement for signs of relapse. At 10 now, his birthday had passed last week. He seemed finally able to inhabit his age rather than shouldering the weight of adulthood. Ren perched on the arm of the couch, her butterfly hair clips catching the sunlight. Phoenix Walsh and Officer Kovac were there too, having become as much a part of this unconventional family as anyone else. They brought paperwork, always more paperwork. But today it was the good kind. Plans for supervised home visits, schedules for family therapy, guidelines for gradual reunification. "I'd like to share something," Autumn said, placing the cake on the coffee table. She pulled out a notebook, similar to the one she'd given Thad months ago. In treatment, they encouraged us to write letters to those we've hurt. I've written many to both of you, but this one I'd like to read aloud. River watched as Thad instinctively reached for Wren's hand. A gesture of protection turned to one of support. Dear Thaddeus and Wren, Autumn began, her voice clear and strong. There are no words big enough to hold my regret, my shame, or my love for you both. For years, I chose darkness over your light. I forced you, Thad, to become a parent when you were meant to be a child. I robbed you, Wren, of the security every child deserves. But you never stopped loving me. Even when I was lost in the worst of my addiction, you, Thad, kept putting stars on calendars for my good days. You, Wren, kept drawing me in your pictures, always with a smile, always with hope. I cannot undo the past. I cannot give you back the childhood years that my choices stole from you. But I can promise you this. Every day, I choose recovery. Every morning, I wake up and decide again to be your mother. Not the mother who left you hungry and cold, but the mother you always deserved. You have taught me what real strength looks like. Thad, watching you carry your sister through the darkness to find help, that was strength. Wren, keeping your heart open and loving despite everything, that was strength. And now, with help from our new family, she gestured to River, Phoenix, and Juniper, I'm learning my own kind of strength. We are not a traditional family. Our healing isn't following a traditional path. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we're exactly who we need to be, scars and all. Autumn closed her notebook, tears streaming freely down her face. Thad moved first, wrapping his arms around his mother. Wren followed, and for a moment, they held each other, their tears mixing with laughter. River caught Phoenix's eye across the room, seeing her own emotions reflected there. They had all been changed by this journey. The children finding safety, Autumn finding sobriety, and the professionals finding themselves drawn into a family story that defied conventional boundaries. Later, as they shared the cake Autumn had baked, Wren pulled out her latest drawing. It showed their entire extended family. Autumn standing tall and clear-eyed, Thad no longer carrying the weight of the world, Wren surrounded by butterfly clips and smiles. But it also showed River with her books, Phoenix with her papers, and Officer Kovac with her badge. In the background, she'd drawn their apartment building, with Dr. Thorne's window glowing like a beacon. This is us, she announced proudly. All of us. Thad studied the drawing, then looked around the room at their assembled family. Not bound by blood but by choice, by struggle, by healing. Yeah, he said, reaching for another piece of cake with the casual freedom of a child who no longer had to worry about where the next meal would come from. This is us. The spring sunlight streamed through River's windows, touching each face in the room. Outside, Portland was awakening to another day. But in here, in this moment, something precious had already awakened, the realization that family isn't always what you're born into, but sometimes what you build from the ashes of what was lost. Autumn touched her sobriety chip. Thad laughed at something Officer Kovac said, and Wren began planning her next masterpiece. They were not perfect, not completely healed, but they were together, choosing each other every day, building something new and strong and real. A different kind of family, but a family nonetheless.